A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. We have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction. We have spent more than $2 billion on the greatest scientific gamble in history, and we have won.
18 years ago, the event of nuclear weapons changed the course of the world, as well as the war. Since that time, all mankind has been struggling to escape from the darkening prospect of mass destruction on Earth. In an age when both sides have come to possess enough nuclear power to destroy the human race several times over.
The cornerstone of our strategic policy continues to be to deter a nuclear attack upon this country or its allies, and to accomplish this by maintaining an ability to inflict an unacceptable level of damage upon any aggressor at any point in a nuclear exchange, even though that aggressor strikes us first with the full weight of their force. This is what we mean by our assured destruction capability, the capability to respond with a level of power so great as to destroy the aggressor.
And recently, we and other NATO members have decided to develop and to deploy modernized intermediate-range nuclear forces.
Certainly we don't want such weapons for their own sake. We don't desire excessive forces or what some people have called overkill. Basically, it's a matter of others knowing that starting a conflict would be more costly to them than anything they might hope to gain. And yes, it is sadly ironic that in these modern times, it still takes weapons to prevent war.
Responding to a New Year message from Kim Jong-un in which he said the country's nuclear weapons could reach anywhere in the US. Mr. Trump tweets, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un just stated that the nuclear button is on his desk at all times. Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I too have a nuclear button, but it is a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works.
In front of a massive video screen, Putin revealed several weapon systems. Among them, illustrations of a new ICBM, a new cruise missile, and a nuclear torpedo that can cross oceans.
We must modernize and rebuild our nuclear arsenal, hopefully never having to use it, but making it so strong and so powerful that it will deter any acts of aggression by any other nation or anyone else.
President Putin has ordered Russia's strategic nuclear forces to be placed on high alert.
Putin might use a tactical nuclear weapon in this fight. Are you worried?
Not only me. I think all over the world, all the countries have to be worried.
A mere 77 years ago, nuclear weapons decimated Hiroshima and Nagasaki. How we fail to see this as a dire warning of our future is clearly our mutual addiction to delusion. How else to explain that mass destruction guarantees global peace and security? Our ultimate challenge is now looming larger by the moment. No time to lose to find that path to protect and to preserve all life right now and into the future. If not, how far from ground zero are we going to make it?
We have one weapon alone that would destroy everything.
It's one thing to have a house burned down. It's another thing to have a nuclear weapon be detonated and release agents and entities in the environment that for tens of thousands of years will be active and cause degenerative change. And we're finally starting to come to terms with the bigger issues, that what was unleashed in the Marshall Islands and in Kazakhstan and up in what used to be Tibet and in, globally where all the nuclear weapons tests were conducted, what was unleashed is planetary change, and it's a significant factor.
I thought I'd seen the end of the world.
Well, I was involved with the testing of atomic bombs. When? They don't know. They never knew that we tested atomic bombs.
So what is this all about, these atomic bomb? As I grew up, I have never heard about what is hydrogen or dahij ka mane. Hearing many stories of the bikini, test in the bikini, and it's really part of me. It's really in my gut, bothering me. What is this?
Let's go back to what the world was like at the end of World War II.
Scene 25, take one.
Well, now then, James, will you tell them that the United States government now wants to turn this great destructive force into something good for mankind?
For the good of mankind, I believe that this was a total opposite.
Everything good, and they're willing to go, and everything is God's hand.
They just wanted to help the world. I believe that they also wanted to let everyone else know that we're out here on the map.
Well, you tell them and King Judah that everything being in God's hands, it cannot be other than good.
Our military power was at its peak, and we alone had the atomic weapon. But we didn't use this wealth and this power to bully. We used it to rebuild.
The atomic bomb came to us as a power that we could not stand up to.
We raised up the war-ravaged economies, including the economies of those who had fought against us.
So it was literally a secret place off the maps. People didn't have the right to, especially after 1958, they shut it down so you couldn't have free access. The Marshallese couldn't leave without permission, and people couldn't come into the Marshall Islands without permission. And the United States controlled all of that.
At first, the peace of the world was unthreatened because we alone were left with any real power, and we were using it for the good of our fellow man.
It totally controlled our lives. When perfumes were reintroduced, the most popular perfume in the islands, and I'm thinking maybe 1949 or 1950, was one called the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb. From the backbone of what was supposed to be our commerce to such an essential as something to make our women folks feel good. All were tied into the atomic bomb.
Because basically we're on the front lines here, the Marshallese. We're on the front lines of all the natural disasters that you can name, especially the man-made disaster from the nuclear bomb.
The atomic bomb, the megaton bomb, is an horrendous, horrendous weapon. I can say that from experience. I've been there. I've seen 4 of them. I felt it. I still feel it.
So what happened here, it's quite similar to violating somebody, like emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually traumatizing them and their future generations, and then totally forgetting that it ever happened. Or they don't even know who we are.
There was no sound, nothing. Suddenly, from blackness, I saw the bones in my hand. Every bone in my hand I could see, as if I was stripped of flesh.
What people don't understand is that every single nuclear weapons test that was conducted, every single, up until the most recent with North Korea, creates a fingerprint in the atmosphere and is still there.
So many people in the world that are oblivious to the fact that these 9 countries did these nuclear weapons testing. I mean, there's people in the UK that have no idea that Britain even tested nuclear weapons. So over the last couple of years, we've set up Lab Rats, which is for the legacy of the atomic bomb recognition for atomic test survivors, working with people like ICAN, Peace Boat, CND, and across the pond with the National Association of Atomic Veterans, the Enewetak Cleanup Crew, Children of Atomic Veterans, and Still Glowing. And we believe that bringing the world together is the best way to have this voice for nuclear testing. You know, the Runit Dome, the environment, the people, the generations of people that are still suffering is why we're here.
As a child, you hear the word Christmas and you think it's something nice, don't you? You think it's some kind of a paradise and, you know, this beautiful Pacific island. But, you know, as time's gone on, it's like an horror story, really, for a lot of people who, you know, were involved in the tests and their families.
August 1957, I got posted to a place called Christmas Island.
Christmas Island, an atoll in the Pacific which until 1957 history had brushed by.
I'm the daughter of Mr. James William Eads, and he served with Operation Grapple on Christmas Island 1957 and 1958, and it is a story which actually had a major impact on him mentally and physically, and it went on to have a major impact on my life.
J'ai participé aux expériences nucléaires en 1971 et 72 à Morowa, en Polynésie française, et ce qui m'a valu des problèmes de santé assez sérieux 20 ans après.
Maralinga Test Range in the stark, wide-open spaces of South Australia.
My father served at Maralinga in the 60s during the nuclear tests. He was there at the minor trials, which are possibly some of the most polluting tests that were done by the British government.
It is important for the world to know and learn about experiences of the Marshallese people in terms of the nuclear weapon testing program here, to tell their story. In doing this, when others that are out there, like in French Polynesia, in Japan, in Chernobyl, Fukushima, Australia, Maralinga, Christmas, Kazakhstan, and Johnson Island, all those places that testing programs have been taking place, we'll know that we're not alone, because we care not just for our families and our people, but especially for the world. So we should consider one another as brothers and sisters.
One of the really tragic aspects of the story of human radiation experimentation, of nuclear exposure in the Marshall Islands and the U.S. response, was that the main questions that were driving U.S. response were military questions. What they looked at and what they were especially concerned were those kinds of things that would crop up that would inhibit the ability for soldiers to immediately function.
Parce que j'aurais jamais imaginé que des pays envoient volontairement des hommes se faire tuer uniquement pour voir comment ça pouvait fonctionner un engin de mort.
I guess he told me a lot of stuff, maybe knowing that someday the truth would come out, and that I, maybe after he had gone, should be one of the ones who helped carry this forward.
I feel like we may have been part of a human radiation experiment.
They were simply human guinea pigs is what they were.
They sent
22,000 men to witness nuclear detonations, needed to see what would happen. Not just our fathers, not just our grandfathers, us descendants, we're an experiment that they want hidden.
They got these pigs from Missouri, 1,500 of them. So we had a real challenge keeping them alive and healthy. The facility test was for a mass casualty test so that they could determine which wounds were fatal even with all the medical care you could give them. So they would know whether just to give those a sedative or that, and then go to spend the time on ones that have a chance of surviving, like in a nuclear blast. After the shots were over, we had to euthanize all the pigs that were still alive and the ones that we didn't send back to Walter Reed. All of my training was to keep animals healthy and alive. It bothered me a lot. I still have nightmares of that.
We have changed ourselves and every life form on this planet. And we've also fouled our nest in severe degenerative ways.
Island gain mirar chorrenjen, elwair chorrenjen, kagamel milwan America kitchen bomb. Tragar lawyer ngan army jin anyway tak. Begini ronglap mudruk. You can throw a melego on army in lawyer, call up chorren again rar, uni and air periloyan kagamel kagamel of Dada ilo Nimole. Emperor army or roll, Ganwancho army or roll, Ngan roll up, Ilo, Irer Crowley, Elegant, Irer Portugal and Major. Yelmagilo Yone, John Thousand Ralmin Pugin Nemo rallied.
And after 57 in 1958, they had a conference to review all the records, and they said this is a phenomenal opportunity to study. If we return these people back to their homeland, to their island, in a controlled environment, in a laboratory environment, we can look at the effects of radiation as it moves through the environment, through the food chain, and through the human body. We could do it in a long-term study. The reasons why we have this notion of crimes against humanity came from the public outrage with the experiments that were conducted during World War II. Outrage over the German experiments.
Army like Chaplangan Ronglap, Kali Kare, Magardangar, Archaguilo, Yenar, Udala Pamo, Ilo Pigini, Marchelet Ronglap. Ilo Nimole Manu Agra Parano Pakain Nang Mijin Cancer Gome Army Romer are Pelu Kamelgo Rar Pugi.
Ilo Trill Gardan Nabri Igiano ne Arvodra Palmulo Pigini and Alukun Kabelangan Army Royal Namri were all the Canadian green Nan Owlet Mengar yellow. And I look on like children karido number three.
Ke ailang warin, jaban hum magcian chicken ngan chicken. Ke mayan kaje jere ailang warin. Jajaji jene cita ke emayan dikit ke jilo lamorinar. Ewe jin ke mi mangai Mejanawar, Kabur, all Mangago Rejik Perio and Islangin, Kemikangi, will Mangago Jem Kanai. Elang Melele Idok and Poison, a chap poison, and Yaji you walk tag a waging, a chap poison.
They did not recognize nor really concern themselves with the long-term effects, and they didn't concern themselves with things that involve women's issues, for example.
My first wife, she had 13 miscarriages.
People who live in contaminated environments, contaminated by the nuclear age, is that they're all dealing with not just place-based realities, but a global reality of problems that are experienced by themselves, by their children and their children's children and children's children and children's children, and will be till who knows when.
Ajiri ruo rabar charranjin fameo. Chiwana egile paran em chiwana egile pujen artuetok pujen ngan napai. Hime barjang ajiri nejinjat ajiri.
There were no words to describe in the Marshallese language what they were giving birth to.
My daughter, she was born in 1949, so that was 2 years after I was exposed. All through her teenage years, she had problems with her endocrine system. She ended up having half of her pancreas removed. In '96, she died of a malignant brain tumor.
My youngest daughter, at 11, she started to change features and she grew a hump on her back. We had to shave her twice a day. I'm not talking about facial hair.
Our daughter has proved afterwards to have a skeletal, I'll explain it as being skeletal problems. She's got serious problems in her back, floating kneecaps, and quite bad stomach problems. And she can have that for the rest of her life. And that is my life.
But when you speak to veterans' families across the world, not just the United Kingdom, but across the world, and there's always this common theme, especially with descendants, of autoimmune diseases.
My bones, the doctors have never been able to say why. My bones and joints just give way and break. But I've had 22 broken bones and 16 joint surgeries before I was age 40.
When they said, well, you may present yourself as healthy, you look healthy, you look strong right now based on the bone scans, bone results, x-rays we're looking at it, that cerebral spine is that of a 94-year-old man.
But now I have prostate cancer and bone cancer, and it's metastasized. I had the radiation treatment, my fingernails all fell off and lost all my hair.
One of my children ended up very early, had to have all his teeth removed because they were just falling apart. I have the bone structure of a 70-year-old man.
They should have told me, well, you're going to have a hell of a life from now on. Your teeth are going to fall out. You're going to have cancer operations, but we're not going to take care of you anymore.
Ikan balik dada kini jemar abar cernain jen nangin mijin radiation, jemar mijin tumor, kini arparaino cernain nangin mijin thyroid, tar mijin puruan atrak bunolok in the mimit.
And I took the hormone treatments, which are pills and that make you get hot flashes and boobs and your testicles, and you shrivel up. They make a it out of you.
I knew nothing about radiation or the atomic bomb. No special training or anything.
Et j'ai eu le sentiment que l'État français m'avait menti quand il disait que nous ne risquions rien, que tout était maîtrisé, que la France veillait à la bonne sécurité du personnel et que s'il y avait de la pollution dans le monde, c'était à cause des essais américains et essais français, des essais russes, parce que nous, les Français, on faisait les choses beaucoup plus propres. Donc,
our own atmospheric tests last year were conducted under conditions which restricted such fallout to an absolute minimum.
And don't worry, the only background radiation is the same as if he was in Denver, Colorado.
We are taking every precaution to be certain that no man is injured in any way.
If there wasn't radiation there, why do we have to clean it up? Why did we have to spend 3 years removing 110,000 cubic yards of contaminated soil from the various islands, transporting them over to Ruined and dropping them into one of the craters? And then again, why did that have to be sealed off with 18 inches of concrete if it wasn't contaminated?
kalbini payinen ilo runit ilo anno karcha melele gage.
The United States laid hundreds of miles of large copper cables during the nuclear weapons testing at Bikini and Eniwetok atolls. They were used to connect, monitor, and to trigger detonation. The highlighted holes in the ground are where the people of Eniwetok dug up these cables decades after the test and sold as scrap. They had no choice. They had to survive. This is Ruined Island, approximately 1 mile long, the site of 17 separate nuclear weapons tests. One was a misfire which spread raw, weapons-grade plutonium across the entire landscape, making this one of the most radiologically contaminated places on our planet, many times worse than Chernobyl, and will be off limits for tens of thousands of years.
I tell everybody that the most important thing to fight for is complete abolition of nuclear weapons. And I know you say, oh, it can't be done. Well, they're not even trying. They're trying to build better ones. There's no such thing as a better one. I say worse ones.
Il ne faut pas se faire absolument aucune illusion. Un jour ou l'autre, on s'en servira.
I have seen World War III up close and personal, and we don't need it.
In this present day, we've got Mr. Putin talking about he'll be throwing a few atom bombs around. Once that starts, it'll never stop until the end of the world.
The atom test for the good of mankind, to bring peace to the world. Our children are still fighting in military. We should get Nobel Peace Prize or some kind of prize to tell the world that we have sacrificed enough.
It is unclear how this story will unfold. We're living both the nightmare and the dream. And it's amazing times. It's startling and stunning how we humans are living right now. And it's shocking and appalling that we are so ignorant and have no disregard for generations to come. So whose voices should we be listening to? We should be listening to those voices of peoples who say, generations to come. I live 7, 8, 10 generations out. I live in the past, present, and future. You know, and that's the way we should be making our decisions.
One of the areas that we want to work on is educating the world. The children don't get taught. Nobody knows about the testing program. We are educating future generations. And you can see that we created the 4 rats. Jesse, Runit, Dom, and Kitty. So it's my aim, and the aim of the lab rats, is that generations of children will recognise these rats, recognise Kitty and the other rats, and it will be the starting point for them to start researching and to start to understand the nuclear testing programs. I'd like to introduce you now to Kitty. We will be taking Kitty out and about, getting pictures with children, getting the hook for the child, getting them to realise that this happened. It's time to embrace the TPNW, end the production of nuclear weapons, the deadliest of man's creations. We need to make sure that nobody ever, ever forgets.
So, can I ask you for a quick show of hands on the stage? Everybody there. Who's had cancer? Can you raise your hand, please? So that's all of them. Okay, thank you. Everybody on stage who's lost a child, please, either through early death or miscarriage or anything.
Jual lalu me, perpadan lalim, perpadan lalu ami. Kaman boleh jual lalu ijukun wajuan. Majalin im lalim, bangai majalin jauh. All the lalin ni perjauh.